It starts with a silent notification on your screen. A calendar invite titled Quick Sync or Team Update. No agenda. No context. Just a Friday afternoon at 4:30 p.m., a time when the office usually starts to exhale. You click the link, and instead of your direct supervisor, you see a blank-faced HR representative from a third-party consulting firm. In less than 3 minutes, your 12-year career is terminated. Your access to Slack is cut before the call even ends. Your laptop becomes a brick. This isn't just a bad day at the office. This is a micro-catastrophe that signals a much larger, more clinical reality: the liquidation of the American middle class. You aren't being fired because of your performance. You are being liquidated because the forensic math of the global economy no longer supports your existence as a CAW due to employee. Well, welcome to Bond Money Mind. I'm Bond. We don't look at the news. We look at the ledger. Before we perform the autopsy on your paycheck, make sure you subscribe to the Bond Money Mind channel. We are here to navigate the systemic traps that the mainstream media refuses to acknowledge. Let's look at the forensic evidence. For half a century, the W-2 contract was the bedrock of social stability. You gave 40 hours of your life every week, and in exchange, the system provided a predictable path to homeownership, healthcare, and retirement. But that contract was drafted in an era of 3% inflation and 0% interest rates. That era is dead. Today, the W-2 is a systemic trap designed to extract maximum productivity while providing minimum security. If you are earning $150,000 a year in a major U.S. hub like Austin, Denver, or Atlanta, you might feel successful. But when we apply forensic math, the illusion vanishes. Let's run the recursive subtraction. On a $150,000 gross salary, Uncle Sam takes his cut first. After federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare, you are left with approximately $110,000. If you live in a state with income tax, subtract another $7,000 to $9,000. Now you are at $101,000. But we are just getting started. To maintain that W-2 position, you incur what I call the energy cost of labor. You pay for a vehicle, insurance, and fuel to commute to a cubicle. That is a $6,000 annual tax on your time. What you pay for professional attire and high-priced convenience meals because the system has drained your time bank so thoroughly that you can no longer perform basic domestic labor. Subtract another $5,000. Then comes the interest rate noose. In 2020, a median home at a 3% interest rate cost you $1,600 a month. Today, that same home at 7% costs you $3,200. That is an additional $19,000 a year vanished into the pockets of the banking sector. By the time you subtract the hidden tax of 8% real-world inflation on groceries and utilities, your $150,000 high-earner salary has a net purchasing power of roughly $62,000 in 2019 terms. You are working twice as hard for half the life. This is an incentive mismatch of historic proportions. Why is this happening now? Because the era of cheap money has been replaced by the era of expensive efficiency. When interest rates were at zero, corporations were incentivized to hoard human capital. They hired thousands of people just to keep them away from competitors. These were zombie jobs, roles that produced no tangible value but looked good on a growth chart. But as the Federal Reserve hiked rates to combat the very inflation they created, the cost of carrying a human being became a liability. A human requires health insurance, 401k matching, office space, and emotional management. An AI algorithm requires a server rack and a cooling fan. The corporate incentive has shifted from growth at all costs to margin protection at all costs. AI isn't just a tool for productivity. No, it is the ultimate liquidator. It allows companies to bridge the gap between high interest rates and the need for quarterly earnings beats by removing the most expensive line item on the balance sheet: you. This isn't a personal failure of the worker. It is a systemic failure of the W-2 model. The system is no longer designed to employ you. It is designed to automate you out of the equation to service the massive corporate debt loads accumulated during the easy money decade. We are witnessing the transition from a labor-intensive economy to a capital-intensive one. In a labor economy, your time is an asset. In a capital economy, your time is a cost to be minimized. Every hour you spend trying to prove your worth to a corporation is an hour you are losing in the race against the algorithm. They are not looking for the best employees anymore. They are looking for the most efficient way to eliminate the need for employees altogether. This is the first layer of the forensic investigation. The W-2 isn't a safety net. It's a tether to a sinking ship. In Part 2, we will examine the debt-to-degree trap and how the American education system has become a predatory lending scheme designed to produce workers for jobs that will no longer exist by the time the loan is paid off. The math doesn't lie, even when the recruiters do. Stay with me. The evidence gets much sharper from here. To understand the liquidation of the American career, we have to look past the HR brochures and dive into the cold, hard forensics of the corporate ledger. Most employees view their salary as a reward for their time. As an investigator, I see it differently. In the eyes of a chief financial officer, your W-2 is not a reward. It is a liability. It is a high-maintenance, depreciating asset that is currently being outpaced by cheaper, more efficient alternatives. Let's perform a recursive subtraction on the modern American dream to see what's actually left. We'll start with a standard upper-middle-class salary in a major U.S. hub like Charlotte or Phoenix, $120,000 a year. On paper, that sounds like the finish line. In reality, and it's a systemic trap designed to keep you in a state of perpetual motion without ever gaining ground. First, we apply the primary forensic subtraction, the immediate tax harvest. Between federal income tax, state tax, and the mandatory FICA contributions for Social Security and Medicare, roughly $32,000 vanishes before the check even hits your bank account. You are now operating with $88,000. But the subtraction doesn't stop there. We have to account for the maintenance of human capital. To keep a W-2 employee operational, there are mandatory fees, health insurance premiums, high deductible plans, and the forced savings of a 401k, which in a high inflation environment is often just a pool of capital being devalued in real time. Subtract another $12,000 for these benefits. You are down to $76,000. Now, let's look at the energy tax of the W-2 lifestyle. In the U.S. market, the cost of being work-ready has skyrocketed. You have the commute tax, the cost of a vehicle, insurance, and fuel, which has seen a recursive increase due to global supply chain volatility. Then there is the shelter trap. To hold that $120,000 job, you likely live in a high cost of living area where the median rent or mortgage takes 40% of your take-home pay. After housing, transport, and the inflated cost of calories, food prices that are up 25% since 2020, your actual discretionary yield is less than $20,000 a year. But you are working 2,000 hours a year for a net profit of $10 an hour. This is the incentive mismatch. You are providing maximum value to the corporation, but the system is extracting 90% of that value before you can even touch it. This is where the interest rate environment becomes the executioner. For the last decade, Interest rates were near zero. Money was free. Corporations could afford to keep zombie departments, layers of middle management and administrative staff that didn't necessarily produce anything, but looked good on an organizational chart. But when the Federal Reserve hiked rates to 5%, the math changed overnight. Every dollar a company spends on a human must now yield a higher return than if they simply parked that dollar in a risk-free treasury bill. If you are a W-2 employee and you aren't directly generating 3 to 5 times your salary and revenue, you are a net negative asset. In a high-interest rate world, companies are no longer hiring for growth. They are cutting for survival. Enter the AI catalyst. From a forensic standpoint, AI is not a tool. It is a capital expenditure that replaces an operating expense. When a company pays you, they have to deal with payroll taxes, workers' comp, office space, and the messy unpredictability of human life. When a company pays for an AI enterprise license, it's a tax-deductible business expense with zero overhead. We are seeing a massive yield gap opening up. An AI agent can perform the data entry, the basic legal research, or the Tier 1 customer support of 10 employees for the cost of one electricity bill. So the forensic math is brutal. If a machine can do 60% of your job, the company doesn't keep you to do the other 40%. They liquidate your position and distribute your remaining tasks to the survivors. This isn't a temporary recession. It's a structural realignment of how value is captured in the U.S. economy. The W-2 model was built for the industrial age, where labor was scarce and capital was localized. In the digital age, labor is becoming an infinite commodity through automation, while capital is fleeing to the most efficient compute. You are being squeezed between a ceiling of rising interest rates and a floor of AI-driven wage deflation. The system is no longer designed to support a middle class. It is designed to optimize the return on compute. If your primary source of income is a single signature on a paycheck, you are currently standing on a trapdoor. The forensic evidence suggests that the door is already beginning to swing open. We are witnessing the systematic liquidation of the professional class. And the most dangerous thing you can do is assume that your experience or your tenure makes you immune to the math. Logic dictates that when the cost of capital exceeds the yield of labor, the labor is deleted. This is the cold reality of the 2024 economy. The question isn't whether your job is at risk, it's whether you have the forensic tools to see the exit before the liquidation is complete. Let's look at the ledger of the modern American corporation. For a decade, we lived in a fantasy land of zero interest rates. Capital was free. In that environment, a W-2 employee was a low-risk asset. If you hired someone who wasn't perfectly productive, it didn't matter. The cost of carrying that person was negligible because the money used to pay them cost the company almost nothing. But the Federal Reserve changed the rules. When interest rates climbed from 0 to over 5%, they didn't just make your mortgage more expensive. They turned every W-2 seat into a high-interest liability. Think about it. A company with 10,000 employees is effectively carrying a massive recurring debt obligation. If the average salary is $100,000, that's a $1 billion annual burn. At 0% interest, you can fund that burn with cheap debt or venture capital. At 5%, that $1 billion payroll costs the company an extra $50 million just in the opportunity cost of capital. This is the forensic reality of the Great Liquidation. Management isn't just looking to save money, they are looking to deleverage their human debt. And this is where artificial intelligence enters the room as the ultimate debt restructuring tool. In the past, If you wanted to replace a human, you needed a better human. Today, you just need a better algorithm. Let's do the forensic math on a mid-level marketing manager in Chicago. Gross salary, $120,000. But the company's actual cost is far higher. We have to perform a recursive addition of the hidden burdens. First, add the employer's share of Social Security and Medicare at 7.65%. That's $9,180. Add health insurance premiums, which average $15,000 per year for a family plan. Add a 4% 401k match, another $4,800. Add the cost of workers' compensation insurance, the office lease, the electricity, the software licenses, and the management overhead required to oversee that person. Suddenly, that $120,000 employee costs the company $165,000 in hard cash. Now, apply the interest rate filter. If that company is carrying debt at 7 or 8%, the cost of liquidity is paramount. On that $165,000 is capital that could be used to pay down debt or invest in high-yield assets. Enter the AI agent. An AI doesn't need healthcare. It doesn't need a 401k match. It doesn't take sick days, and it doesn't require a middle manager to keep it motivated. An enterprise-grade AI solution might cost $50,000 a year in licensing and compute. The forensic subtraction is brutal. $165,000 minus $50,000 equals a $115,000 annual profit per seat. This isn't a theory. It's a systemic incentive mismatch. Your goal as a W-2 employee is to maximize your stability and benefits. The company's goal in a high-interest environment is to maximize liquidity and minimize recurring liabilities. You are the liability. Said we are seeing a fundamental shift in how work is valued. In the industrial age, you were paid for your physical labor. In the information age, you were paid for your cognitive labor. In the AI age, you are being paid for your residual judgment, and that is a rapidly depreciating asset. The system is designed to liquidate the middle. The high-end earners who control the capital and the low-end earners who perform physical tasks that robots can't yet do are safe for now. But the W-2 middle class, the spreadsheet fillers, the report writers, the code monkeys, are being erased by the math of the Federal Reserve and the efficiency of Silicon Valley. If you look at the quarterly reports of the S&P 500, you'll see a recurring theme: doing more with less. That's corporate speak for "we found a way to replace your salary with a server farm." And this is the forensic evidence of a career path that is being systematically decommissioned. The trap is that most people still believe the old contract is valid. They think that if they work hard and stay loyal, the company will protect them. But a company is just a series of balance sheets, and right now, those balance sheets are screaming for the removal of human overhead. We have to understand that the W-2 is no longer a shield. It's a target. Every benefit you negotiated, the dental plan, the extra week of vacation, the remote work flexibility, is just another line item that makes the AI alternative look more attractive. The math is recursive and unforgiving. As interest rates stay higher for longer, the pressure to automate increases. As AI becomes more capable, the cost of automation decreases. Yet you are caught in the jaws of a pincer movement. On one side, the cost of keeping you is rising due to inflation and interest rates. On the other side, the cost of replacing you is falling due to technological advancement. The point where those two lines cross is the date of your layoff. This is not about your performance. You could be the best employee in the world, but you cannot compete with the forensic efficiency of a zero marginal cost digital worker. The system is recalibrating, and it doesn't care about your mortgage or your career goals. It only cares about the spread between the cost of capital and the return on automation. If you are still relying on a single W-2 paycheck, you are holding a depreciating asset in a high-inflation, high-interest world. So you are essentially betting against the most powerful economic forces of the 21st century. The liquidation is already underway. You can see it in the tech sector, you can see it in finance, and you are starting to see it in law and medicine. No one is immune to the math. The question is no longer whether your career is at risk. The question is how much time you have left before the ledger is balanced at your expense. When we look at the energy costs of a human versus a machine, the gap widens even further. A human requires food, housing, transportation, and climate control, all of which are becoming more expensive as energy costs rise. An AI requires electricity and cooling, which are being optimized at a scale humans can't match. In a world of finite resources, the system will always move toward the most energy-efficient solution, and that solution is rarely a human sitting in a cubicle. This is the forensic reality of the new economy. The W-2 is being liquidated because it is no longer the most efficient way to convert capital into value. To survive, you have to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like a forensic investigator of your own life. You have to see the traps before they spring. The interest rate hike was the starting gun. The AI revolution is the race, and the prize is the survival of your financial future. If you stay in the middle, you will be liquidated. The math doesn't lie, and the system doesn't have a heart. It only has a bottom line. Let's look at the autopsy of a mid-tier career in the current U.S. market. For decades, the W-2 employment contract was more than just a tax designation. It was a social contract. You gave your time, and the corporation gave you a hedge against the volatility of life. They handled the payroll tax, the health insurance, the disability risk, and the retirement match. But as interest rates rose to 5% and the cost of capital spiked, the cost of carrying that human hedge became toxic to the corporate balance sheet. This is where we enter the era of the liquidated career. The corporation is no longer a community. It is an optimization engine. We are seeing a massive systemic shift where the unit of labor is being unbundled. Look at the data. Large-cap firms are aggressively moving toward a core and periphery model. As the core is a tiny group of decision-makers and AI orchestrators. The periphery is you, the 1099 contractor, the vendor, the temporary consultant. On paper, it looks like a choice. They offer you a higher hourly rate, maybe $60 an hour instead of $40. But let's apply forensic math to that illusion. When you move from a W-2 to a 1099, you immediately inherit the employer's half of the Social Security and Medicare taxes. That's a 7.65% hit right off the top before you even see a dime. But we have to go deeper. Recursive subtraction dictates we account for the loss of the employer-sponsored health plan. In the U.S. market, a private family plan with a reasonable deductible can easily cost $2,000 a month. That is $24,000 a year of post-tax income gone. Now, and subtract the 401k match, typically 3 to 6% of your gross. Subtract the 15 days of paid time off and the 11 federal holidays. When you do the math, that $60 an hour contract actually nets you less than a $35 an hour W-2 job. You are paying for the privilege of being fired at a moment's notice. This is the incentive mismatch. The system encourages you to feel like an entrepreneur while you are actually just a line item on a spreadsheet that can be deleted with a single keystroke. And this is where the AI factor becomes lethal. In the past, the frictional cost of hiring and firing kept labor stable. It was expensive and time-consuming to find a replacement. Now, AI-driven talent platforms allow a company to swap a human contractor in Denver for a human contractor in Manila or an LLM agent in the cloud in milliseconds. The energy cost of managing you has dropped to near zero. Therefore, your value to the system has become purely transactional. If you aren't producing 3 times your cost in real time, you are a liability. This liquidation isn't just about money, it's about the erosion of the human buffer. Without the W-2 structure, you are exposed to the raw, unshielded volatility of the global market. You are a single-person corporation with no capital, no scale, and no safety net. We are seeing the death of the middle-class trajectory because that trajectory was built on the compounding stability of the W-2. When you liquidate the career, you liquidate the ability to plan for 10 years out. And you can only plan for the next invoice. Consider the systemic friction of the mortgage market. The U.S. housing economy is built on the debt-to-income ratio of a stable W-2 earner. When you become a 1099 contractor, the banking system views you as a high-risk entity. You often need 2 years of tax returns just to prove you are solvent. By the time you have those 2 years, the interest rate environment or the AI landscape has shifted again, and your liquidated career has moved to a new industry. You are trapped in a cycle of perpetual qualification. This is the systemic mismatch. The institutions of the 20th century, banks, schools, insurance companies, are still looking for a W-2 that is rapidly becoming extinct. That you are being forced to live in a 21st century gig economy while trying to survive in a 20th century financial infrastructure. The math simply does not compute. The forensic reality is clear. The corporate world is offloading the risk of existence onto the individual while keeping the rewards of productivity for the shareholders. It is a brilliant, cold-blooded liquidation of the American dream, one contract at a time. We have to understand that this isn't a temporary downturn. It is a fundamental redesign of how value is extracted from the human element. The precision management era means that if a task can be measured, it can be automated or outsourced. If it can't be measured, it's considered overhead and is the first thing to be cut. You are being audited by an algorithm that doesn't care about your mortgage, what your children's tuition, or your 20 years of loyalty. It only cares about the delta between your cost and your output. And in a world of 5% interest rates, that delta must be massive to justify your presence on the ledger. We are witnessing the final decoupling of productivity from wages. As AI takes over the cognitive heavy lifting, the human worker is relegated to the edge cases, the messy, low-margin tasks that aren't yet worth the compute power to solve. You are the filler in the machine, and the filler is always the most disposable part. This is the liquidation of the W-2, and the math says most people are currently losing the trade. The system has calculated that it is cheaper to replace you than to sustain you. When a company lays off 10,000 people and the stock price jumps, or if the market is cheering for the liquidation of human carrying costs, they are cheering for the efficiency of your obsolescence. You have to stop viewing your job as a career and start viewing it as a short-term liquidity event. If you don't, you'll be left holding a bag of depreciating skills in an economy that has already moved on to the next version of the software. The forensic evidence is undeniable. The W-2 is dying, and it's taking the traditional path to wealth with it. We are entering a period of extreme economic Darwinism, where only those who control the tools of automation, rather than those who are automated by them, will survive the liquidation. We have dissected the anatomy of a liquidation. The W-2 model is not dying because of a lack of work, but because of a fundamental shift in the cost of intelligence and the price of capital. To conclude this investigation, we must look at the final forensic calculation, the net liquidity of a career. This is the math the system hopes you never perform. Let's take a mid-level project manager in a city like Austin or Charlotte. On paper, you earn $130,000. You feel part of the upper middle class. But let's apply the bond forensic filter. First, we subtract the mandatory systemic extractions, federal income tax at 24%, Social Security and Medicare at 7.65%, and state taxes. You are immediately down to roughly $88,000. Now, yet we subtract the cost of maintaining the W-2 infrastructure. You must live within commuting distance of the hub, which inflates your housing costs by at least $15,000 compared to a remote first life. Add in the professional wardrobe, the commute energy costs, and the time poverty tax, the money you spend on convenience because your 40-hour week is actually a 60-hour commitment when you include prep and recovery. Your real take-home pay, your actual liquid surplus, is closer to $45,000. This is your human operating margin. Now, look at the corporate side of the ledger. To pay you that $130,000, the company actually spends about $170,000 when you include benefits, payroll taxes, and office overhead. In a zero-interest rate world, that $170,000 was cheap money. But today, with interest rates sustained at 5%, that same capital could be parked in risk-free assets or used to service debt. The opportunity cost of your salary has tripled. Enter the AI intervention. An ensemble of specialized AI agents, supervised by a single fractional contractor, can now perform 80% of that project manager's functions. The cost of the compute power, the API tokens, and the energy required to run those models is approximately $4,000 per year. The forensic gap is staggering. The corporation is looking at a choice between a $170,000 liability with a shrinking margin or a $4,000 digital asset with an infinite margin. This is the incentive mismatch. Yet the system is not designed to protect your career. It is designed to optimize the yield on capital. When your labor becomes a high-interest liability, the system will liquidate you. We are entering the era of the sovereign service provider. The W-2 is a legacy contract from an industrial age that no longer exists. The new economy rewards those who own their own stack, those who use AI to amplify their output rather than competing against it. You must transition from being a line item on a balance sheet to being a provider of high-margin solutions. You must stop selling your time and start selling your results. The forensic evidence is clear. The safety of a steady paycheck was always an illusion, but in the current macroeconomic climate, that illusion has become a trap. The walls are closing in because the cost of debt is high and the cost of digital intelligence is low. If you remain trapped in the W-2 mindset, you are essentially shorting the most powerful technological revolution in human history, while being long on an asset, your labor, that is being devalued in real time. This investigation into the death of the W-2 is a warning, but it is also a blueprint. Survival in this new landscape requires a radical shift in how you perceive value, taxes, and leverage. You cannot win a game that is rigged against your biological limitations. You win by stepping outside the system and becoming the one who manages the machines, rather than the one the machines are designed to replace. If you want to stay ahead of these systemic shifts and learn how to navigate the forensic realities of the modern economy, you need to be part of this community. Subscribe to the Bond Money Mind channel now. We are peeling back the layers of the global financial engine, revealing the truths that the institutions would rather keep hidden. Don't be a victim of the liquidation. Be the investigator of your own financial future. The liquidation of the professional class is not a tragedy. It is a restructuring. The capital is not disappearing. It is moving. It is moving away from inefficient human bureaucracies and toward lean, AI-integrated models of production. Your goal is to follow the capital. Understand the math of your own life. Subtract the hidden fees of your existence. Calculate your true energy cost. When you see the numbers for what they really are, the path forward becomes obvious. The W-2 is dead. Long live the sovereign mind. This is Bond. An investigation closed. Stay sharp. Stay liquid. And remember to subscribe to Bond Money Mind to ensure you never miss a briefing on the forces shaping your wealth. The system is changing. Make sure you are the one holding the ledger.